Alrighty, we are going for it. So I am going to. There it is. So because I cannot figure out tech necessarily as much, we're currently at $5. Thank you, Katie. Because I'm not necessarily as good at figuring out how to operate everything all at once. I'm going to be looking at comments on my phone while I play Chrono Ghost. Thank you for everybody who has shown up so far, and I think that might only be Travis, but that is good. We at least have one. Travis is the other game detective, for those of you who are new to the channel, or just watching for the first time, and he is going to be supporting me throughout, giving updates about funds we're raising and all that good stuff, and also making sure that my tech is somewhat good. Alright, so the game that I'm going to be playing from 2 to 4 today is called Chrono Ghost. I got it off of Steam, and I put the link for the game in the bio for this live video. So if you see it and you want to support people who are creating games who are black, this would be a great game to start with. It's only $5, and it's a great way to support people who are doing a lot of great work, because as somebody who studies video games, and probably just people who play games in general know, black creators and black studios are not known for being... I think I'm gonna have to do the new game first before I do the settings for making it full screen. Oh, just kidding, I have to go like this. Black creators aren't, talked about a lot or discussed a lot, and I thought, since we're doing a fundraiser for groups that are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, that are helping out with bail funds, that it would be great to play games by black people who aren't necessarily getting the buzz or the amount of people playing them as they should. So I'm starting out with Chrono Ghost. And this game... What's up, David? Thank you, Matt, for tuning in. So, I don't really know what's going on. We just got a little thing in the beginning saying that there's something happening. So, I'm at the Forest of Time. And the thing with this is that you slow down time or you speed up time. Kind of similar to Braid. But this time around, it's a little more... I don't know if I want to say intuitive, but it's a little more, pretty simple. It's a little simpler to use in this game. And so the way... Okay, I gotta press the Y button. So it looks like all of the red outlined things are, aren't affected by these time lapses that I can use, but the green ones are. Okay. Oh, shoot. What am I playing this on? This is on Steam. So I believe it's the only platform that's available for. There might be a Switch version coming out soon, although I'm not sure about that. I think it might just be on Steam at this point. Okay. So I gotta stop time here so I do not get slaughtered. Yep. Oh. Just kidding. I died. Okay, so I gotta play that a little better this time. What made you choose this format to raise money? Oh, Tony says I'm the king. Hey Jack, thanks for tuning in. Thank you. Travis, this is a great question. It's a good way to keep me on track. So I was looking for a way to support these movements with the channel in some way. So I was thinking about ways to do it. I was thinking about making a video for our channel with our Game Detectives podcast. I was thinking about doing a video where we talked about how there aren't a lot of black characters in games, let alone black developers and creators. But then I didn't know exactly how to approach it because I didn't know how to talk about the lack of black characters. You have black characters you have black characters in games, not necessarily a lot of characters or stories that are particularly about like made by Black developers or wow, or talking about Black experiences as people kind of have them in their real lives. So I thought that doing a video about how there isn't anything might not have been like the most the most informative or thoughtful. So I decided, how else can I help Black creators, or create games created by Black people? How can I help them get more of an audience? And how could I also do it in a way that might also help out these organizations that are doing a lot of great work? So I thought then about doing a live stream, because I haven't really done live streams before, and I haven't really watched live streams before. But I know there have been live streams that, do donations and are meant to be fundraisers for different things. So I thought, why not do one myself and just see what happens? I also thought it would be a great way just to try out kind of the intricacies of what it's like to stream, and just like kind of figure out the tech behind it too, because it's always been something I've been interested in, but I didn't necessarily I didn't necessarily have like the reason to try out live streaming. I joined a group on campus, but that does live stream games, but I haven't really started with them yet because of coronavirus. So I haven't really had a reason to do some live streaming. So I thought this would be a good time. Hey, Allie, thank you for your kind words. I thought this would be a good way to both test out my abilities in terms of setting up tech, and then also like raising money for a good cause. So if you are on here and you haven't... this part is so difficult. If you're on here and you haven't donated yet, or you haven't seen it yet, in the banner in the bottom left-hand corner, those are all of the accounts that you can send money to. We are raising funds. I thought it was going to go the other way. We're raising funds for Black Lives Matter movement, and specifically, if you donate directly to the Game Detectives Venmo or PayPal, I'm going to be sending that money to the Act Blue Fund that sends money to... Woo! I made it. Why is this not working? Oh, there we go. No, that sends money. The Act Blue Fund sends money to over 70 groups in America. So some of these groups are bail funds, which means that they give money to people who are being arrested during protests. Oh, hey, Caitlin. Donated and emailed by receipt. Thank you. Thank you. You're so nice. These bail funds are for people who are arrested for protesting, which, by the way, is guaranteed by the First Amendment, but you know how that be with these... Oh, glad you got the stream working. Thank you. T Cuddle Shark. I don't know who you are. I don't know if I know you in real life. If I don't, thank you anyway for listening in and watching. Anyways, as I was saying, kind of unsurprisingly, the government likes to avoid... We are now at $65. That's awesome. Double that, that's $130, which is fantastic. I'm matching everybody's donations. So we are making lots of money moves at this point in time, which is awesome. If I can ever get past this point in the game, maybe we'll see more of it, but who knows? I might be stuck here for the next 2 hours. Okay. I'm gonna do this next. Okay, I'm gonna focus. I'm gonna get it. I feel it in my bones that I'm gonna get this. Okay. This is hard. This is hard. Okay. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. I maybe need to do it a different way. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. So, I should probably try something different than what I'm doing. but I'm just going to do the same thing. Okay. Woo! There we go. I remember you wanted to raise $500, so you're already almost a fifth of the way there. That is right, Matt. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. I do want to raise $500, so this is a good start. If you take the average, that was in 10 minutes, so if we get $65 every 10 minutes, I think we're going to reach our goal. But anyway, so one of the things I wanted to donate to, that's part of this Act Blue fund that gets sent out to all these different organizations, are bail funds, which are funds that are usually kind of centered around certain cities, but they might also, you know... Oh, David said if $250 was held, he'd have a pop... Ooh, I should do... Could I do a pop... I'm going to do a Pop Buys mukbang reaction video meet and greet. I need to figure out all of the layers of stuff that I'm going to do in this video. But I will go get Popeyes and do a mukbang live next Friday if we get $250. Actually, you know what? Even better. I'm going to get some food from... So I live right next to Minneapolis, which is another reason why I really wanted to do this, is because the murder of George Floyd has really affected people that are close to, like, physically, proximately close to me. And I know... Oop, and that's just something that's been really affecting the community. So, if I do this mukbang, which I'm going to do, I probably will go out to some restaurants. Oh, I'm not doing a Chick-fil-A mukbang. Hell no. 10K. I'm going to go and do some restaurants in the cities that are run by black folks. So then I can also highlight their... Ooh, I think I made it. Yes! To highlight their restaurants too. That would be good. Maybe I'll get some Popeyes in the meantime so I can do some clickbait with it. So I completed this first level for an extended dash, jump, and dash again. Season of Aging. Alright. I need to wait until that timer... There's that little white bar to the side that, like, arches over me that I need to wait for to be done before I can press Y again. Excuse me. Okay. They have a bunch of great food at Sherman Phoenix. Oh, thank you, Jack. I'm definitely should look... I'm going to look into it. 115. Heck yes. Thank you, everybody, so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it that we're using our dollars towards a good cause. I should probably actually talk about bail funds right now because I've started that conversation like 10 times. The reason why I want to do bail funds is because people are being arrested for protesting and being Stop failing. I'm going to do my best, Travis, I promise. Too bad. I broke my promise. Okay, so these protesters, a lot of them are being arrested or being taken into police custody unlawfully because it is, as it stands nationally, people have a right to protest and protest in the way that people are doing, which means, you know, going out on the streets and arguing for Black Lives Matter movement or whatever. They're legally allowed to do so. And a lot of people are being taken into custody that do not belong there. And so, I mean, we can challenge laws and everything, but for right now, you know, what we need to do right away is to also help people who are unlawfully being put in these, you know, jail or whatever. These bail funds are helping people post bail. I don't know why this isn't working because I'm supposed to jump. But yeah, so these bail funds are really great because they help people, you know, post bail, and how bail is being used right now is it's being used as an excuse to get people off the streets. So it's not being used necessarily like the arresting protesters isn't all about public safety. It's about a way to get protesters off of the streets, which is not okay. Which is not lawful. So these people should not be doing this. So bail funds are doing a lot of great work to help people out. There we go. Just kidding. Oh, hi, Carrie. Thank you for the hearts. I forgot to mention you. Travis, I know you keep saying to stop falling, but I'm going to keep falling because I am struggling. Okay. Urgh! So close. Thank you for laughing at me, Tony. I don't know how live streamers do it. Like, I could not imagine spending my entire life just like playing. Like, this is fun, but it's only been 15 minutes and I'm already like out of energy. I don't know how people do it. And also, I am currently, so my setup right now, you cannot see it, but my laptop is currently, why did I do that? My laptop, oh, Carrie, thank you for donating and thank you for supporting me. So what I've got set up right now, if you have seen the recent Game Detectives video that I posted on our YouTube channel, you'll see that I am currently in a closet. It is literally a cupboard under the stairs. And it's a toy closet. And so there's a bunch of stuff, there's like a bunch of toys that I used to have from my childhood. And currently my laptop that I'm streaming off of is on a printer box. I'm struggling. It's on a printer box, and I have my microphone just barely under the line of sight on 3 board game boxes, 1 box that is for our modem, and then a tackle box, a Fisher-Price tackle box for little kids. So this is it's a jerry-rigged kind of thing. Oh, come on. I'm struggling, people. I'm struggling. Hopefully, I can get out of this level without, dying and being completely... There we go. Completely humiliated by this. Okay. Ah! You're getting very good in the first 2 platforms. Thank you, Bat. That was my goal. This is hard. Okay. Shoot. Tony, I know this is... I like... That was really dumb. I've tested this game before, so I just played the first level before. I have never played past the first level. But I just play tested it just to make sure that it was working with the... Like, it would work with my computer and everything. So I haven't played this level before, so that's probably why I'm doing so terribly. Okay. Okay, this is going very slow. As someone who really studies the medium, why do you think there's such a disparity in highlighting black creators in video games? This medium especially so. Gosh, I could speak for 2 hours about all the crazy ways. Cooper Scribner, so you're playing on PC? Yes, I am. I'm playing on PC right now. The internet in my house is not good enough to where I can stream on Wi-Fi. So I am currently have my modem hooked up to my laptop right now. That's also why I'm in this closet, is because the modem could not reach anywhere else in the house but this closet. Anyway, so Travis is guiding me expertly with these questions right now. So why do you think there's such a disparity in highlighting black creators? First of all, it's just in general in the tech industry that it happens. So you also see, we see the same thing with, black CEOs, black congressmen. It's across all mediums. It's across, news. It's across politics. It's everything. Why I think it's particularly happening with black creators of video games is that video games are part of the tech world, and the tech world, it's not quite as centered in Silicon Valley as, say, new games are now. For a long time it's been Japan and the US have kind of been the prominent spaces for creating games. And both countries have extremely crazy and, I mean, in different ways, both countries have their own problems with race. I think especially in the US, the reason why is because the education gap is very real. Going to school in Milwaukee that has the biggest segregation, and I think Wisconsin for sure has the biggest education gap in the country for states. I'm not sure if Milwaukee has the biggest education gap for cities in the country, but the education gap is one thing. So generally, and I kind of know this a little more because of my education background, generally with STEM fields, white men are just encouraged in all levels from elementary to college to go into STEM fields. So, that caught me by surprise. So that I think is one thing. The education system in this country also is really, oh gosh, that scared me. It really encourages white men to go into these fields, and it discourages women and minority people, probably besides Asians because of their, model minority myth, particularly East Asians, not so much Southeast Asians. But that myth is very dangerous too, in its own way. So education is its own thing, because black people in general are not given equitable educations as white people, or other... Oh, that's cool. Or other people. So it starts there. Another part of it is that the communities where game development occurs, so things like Silicon Valley, things like LA, things like New York, these places where that are epicenters of game development are very expensive to live in. Also places like Seattle. Seattle's a very popular site as well. Very expensive to live in and very difficult for people who do not have a lot of wealth to get to. And unsurprisingly, in America, wealth is primarily generated through... Oh gosh, I'm doing so poorly. Wealth is primarily generated through your family, and particularly, generationally, through the land you own. So white people in general have more wealth because over the generations, white people have been allowed to own land. Men have been allowed to own land in ways that black people and women have not been. So you also don't have a lot of black wealth, which means people who like these games can't, or like, developing video games, can't go to these epicenters of game development. They can't move to New York as easily as somebody from my hometown of Hudson could. Even though, my dad might have the same kind of job as somebody's black dad might, because my family and my parents grew up, and they have a family whose dad was in the military, who could, own their house, who could, because they weren't subject to redlining and all of these other things, they were able to move into spaces that a lot of black people can't. Oh, shoot. I'm explaining this very poorly. But in general, it's just the education is one thing, the wealth is another thing. I think when you talk about direct racism in the industry, then is another thing. So the education and the wealth and the not having access to things is a systemic problem, right? It's a systemic issue that black people face. And in Japan, it's a different story, and I don't know everything about Japan, but it's just in general, in East Asian countries have their own issues with race, but in different ways. When it comes to overt racism in the games industry, that is a very big thing. So, especially in terms of players and fandoms, it's a big thing. Where you overtly see where the loudest voices in the room are white men who are the gamers, right? It's a stereotype that a gamer is a white guy. So often their voices are taken more seriously than people of color or women, for example, especially black men and black women. So a lot of times these game companies aren't listening to those voices, so even people who are advocating for these kinds of things aren't being listened to. I think another thing is that when you do have... So, like, say that these people are advocating they want there to be black characters in these games, and the companies are ignoring them. Another thing is that when you actually do have main characters who are black in video games, and we see this the same thing with LGBTQ people, we see the same thing with female characters. A lot of the time, these companies are accused by white people of, pandering, trying to be an SJW, trying to, be a social, virtue signaler or whatever you want to say, is because a lot of these video game spaces are so hostile to these people that they see if they tell a story about a woman or they tell the story about a black man or whatever, then you have a large vocal community of players who then accuse these game development companies of doing whatever. So, unfortunately, these companies then see their main base, and I'm not saying that all, males who are white have these views, but it's a very vocal portion of the base who says these things. So then, unfortunately, you have the companies listening to these people rather than, listening to people of color or women. You have these game companies listening to this vocal minority of white people who claim that, who claim that all of this stuff is just an excuse to, gain favor with black people. When it's like these game studios might just be actually trying to say, what it would be like for example, with The Walking Dead. Somehow there was controversy about having Lee be the main character because he was black. Even though, to me, that's crazy. But people saw that as, trying to be a social justice warrior, even though he was a character, and, they talked about police brutality maybe once. What's my educational background? So I am an English educator major. So I actually went to school for English education, and that's where I actually learned a lot about these stereotypes, is because these issues have been talked about in English for a while in terms of academia and then also teaching, more so than other genres or other departments. But now I am a master's. I actually just got my master's in media studies at UW Milwaukee. And so I've taken classes about, representations in the media, et cetera, et cetera. I think a big problem with game developers is just that the stereotype that video games are made for and primarily played by white men is just still a thing. More so than, the movies and TV are still catering towards them, but the video games still have that generic idea associated with them more so than other mediums. So that's why, in general, TV is not the... Cooper can confirm I was his English teacher a couple years ago. So in these industries, and I'm not saying any industry is perfect, but in TV, especially with streaming services now, we're seeing a lot more black creators getting their own shows and headlining their own shows. In terms of movies, in general, you have, unfortunately, not as many as on TV, but you generally have more creators who are black, who are trusted to direct, or minorities, etc. Movies are actually very bad at this, but it's slightly improving. Half an hour in, we are at 145. If we get $105 more, I will do a mukbang. And it will be terrifying and disgusting, but we will do it. Okay, so anyway, so video games, and compared to just every other medium, is just seen as more of a place where white men consume media, which actually, when you do the research, and you actually look at it, and if you include stuff like Nintendo Switch, for example, or the 3DS, it's actually much more even, or at least much more, I should say, much more even than something like an Xbox 360. Especially when you start talking about mobile games, which are games, you know, like Candy Crusher, etc., which intellectually, to me, I consider to be video games, just because they're games that use graphic and digital interfaces that people communicate with. Apps are seen as more of something that women can enjoy, or, you know, be consumers of, whereas console games are still considered to be very masculine. But in general, you see, you know, African American communities, especially with mobile games, but then also with mainstream games as well. Show these different types of career, but it really does need income. In the same way, you'd think that indie games would be an outlet to show these. How did video games get to be something that people thought only white men played? That's a great question, and it's there's a lot of things to talk about here, which is great. I love it because I can actually use some of my research to use. So actually, the reason why there's a large reason why video games are seen as kind of a white male field, and a large thing has to do with video games kind of becoming a big thing in the 1970s and 80s with the arcade, and people being concerned about their corrupting power on our youth, which, I mean, again, if you look at the research, is a BS, right? We know that people who are aggressive might play video games, but video games don't cause aggression, etc., etc. Anyway, when arcades started becoming a thing, people, especially parents, were very much like any kind of a new technology. They were worried about their kids, and they were worried about, you know, corrupting youth and everything. So, a way that video game companies kind of got around this is that they started advertising for games in ways that would kind of highlight their educational aspect, or they would talk about, you know, it helps improve hand-eye coordination. In the 1980s, you started seeing conferences and, you know, people going to Congress and telling them that video games are actually beneficial. You see them talking about having conferences held in the late 80s and 90s, where you have congressmen who are talking about how video games corrupt people, and then you have video game companies kind of arguing against it. And there's this term that kind of develops in the 80s, and you can see it in games in movies like War Games, for example, with Matthew Broderick, where with the development of computers, and especially development of computers in the workplace, you have workplaces that want people to, and also video game companies that want people to know how to use computers. They want people to know how to work technology in order to make businesses run smoother. But you have this pushback from other parts of society that see technology as this kind of corrupting agent. So, in order to convince people that tech is good... Sorry, I have to adjust my seating because my left leg is falling asleep. In order to convince people that video games and computers and tech kind of all wrapped into one, they kind of get all collapsed into one big idea during this time period, is that it's actually beneficial for men specifically to play them, because video games and technology can help them improve their skills. They can help them with things like, you know, getting ahead in the workplace. Economically, it was a way to kind of mark yourself as different from your competitors by saying that you have these skills. So eventually this kind of, we call it a discourse, if you want to use the technical term, but it basically like a language that we use to talk about games and computers in the 1970s and 80s, where it's seen as a beneficial thing for boys to do. But on the other end, it's not a beneficial things for other people to do then, because in order to make video games and tech look good, you have to show it in a way that further supports the way that business and media is run at the time period. So if you want to show that video games can help people in general in the 1980s, you have to prove that it helps men in particular. And In order to do that, you have to show white men, because obviously at the same time, if you want to highlight tech as a way for people to get ahead in business, you can't show it actually bringing white men out of business. You have to show it keeping white men in business and showing it as a development for white men to have that can, keep them ahead of their competitors. I'm paraphrasing lots of great research that has been done on this, but basically, games have been marketed towards white men because it's viewed as a way for white men to keep ahead. It all depends on whose grandparents you're talking to. That 100% Cooper, I have to agree. It 100%. It's funny, and this will be one of many times I'm going to be referencing Music Man, but the Music Man, which is a movie musical, the main thing that Harold Hill uses to kind of ensnare people into his thing is that he says the pool hall table is corrupting youth, and there was literally a time where people thought radios were going to be corrupting boys. People thought that pool halls were going to be corrupting boys, which is why you have a movie like The Hustler come out in the 1960s, which makes a guy who, pretends to be bad at pool look really badass. Because back then, people were concerned that pool tables were going to be, corrupting the youth. So in order to convince people that tech was good, that it wasn't going to corrupt youth, that it wasn't going to harm business, it has to be kind of framed in a way where it's still going to support the status quo. And because video games have only been around for so long, it's the medium that's been around probably the least. I mean, if you want to talk about VR being a different medium, if you want to talk about the internet being a different medium, that's another thing. But if you want to talk about audiovisual medium, yep, like Travis says, they said rock and roll was bad, right? So, but in order to sell a lot of product, right, because you're selling an entirely new medium that requires people to buy technology, software. It's not like a TV where you already have kind of this established over the airwaves thing. It's a completely new idea. You have to kind of couch it in ways, and by couch I mean just like imbue it into the existing culture in ways that won't disturb the power of the existing culture. Which sounds like a lot of Tumblr mumbo jumbo, but that's how video games were marketed. So that's why you see this big pushback in the 90s. There's a movement called the Gamer Girls movement, where unfortunately this is again kind of used just to make money, but these companies will then come in and say, well, girls can play video games too. Of course, all of these video games are... Cooking Mama didn't come around back then, but it's all things like, dress up simulators, Barbie fashion video games, etc., etc. Which then, in order to cater to women, they have to cater to the stereotypical woman. Anyway, what race has to do with all of this is basically just that nobody is catering towards black people, and nobody is are like deliberately trying to get black creators to create games because they don't see a way for them to profit off of it back then. So even if you had, say, black kids coming to arcades to play games, to them it didn't really matter if you were catering to or having black characters in your games, because A, characters in general just didn't really matter at all, but then B, then the default becomes white. And you actually hear this a lot when it comes to TV, for example, as well, where they just kind of, when they talk about, there's this interview I listened to with about Jane the Virgin, and they were talking about how it was such a hard sell for TV networks because they just kind of expect, like, the way that TV networks look at the data is just that Latinos will watch whatever we tell them to watch because they'll watch programs where white people are, the main characters. So that stereotype also kind of extends to games where black people are just going to play whatever games we give them. So therefore, we don't really need to have black creators. So what Travis mentioned a while ago, so that explains why kind of mainstream media doesn't do it. They don't see it being beneficial for their pocketbooks. And as much as I love, the games that Nintendo make or other companies make, it's unfortunately true that they just don't see that part of why they're not doing it is because until it becomes monetarily beneficial to them to do so, they're not going to do it. Which then gets into a whole bunch of other things. Travis brought up a good point a couple of minutes ago, too, in that he talked about why then, if we see that mainstream video games are not hiring black people, are not featuring characters that are black, why is it that we're not seeing more games from the indie scene becoming, why aren't we seeing black creators from the indie scene, or black characters from the indie scene becoming bigger? Which then has a whole bunch of different issues associated with it too. Because it's also, it's video games, but it's also a different environment of video games than mainstream video games. So when it comes to indie video game production, that in itself has become its own industry. And indie video games aren't as indie as they used to be. So, when Braid kind of became the first big indie game to take off, or if we want to think of it as the start of the indie renaissance, the economic opportunities, the accessibility to the internet, gosh, I'm doing so bad at this, all of that is way different now than it used to be 10 years ago. I think Braid was actually made in 08 or 07, I forgot which. But 12 years ago, the indie environment was way different than it is now. So in a way, indie is its own industry that isn't as inclusive as it could be. Because indie now kind of has an aesthetic to it that is also, I don't want to say centered on male whiteness, but a lot of then the indie game development is also seen as coming from white guys, especially the most popular ones. So if we think of things like, I love The Beginner's Guide and Stanley Parable, but Davey Radin, white, he's a white guy. Gosh, I'm doing so bad. Toby Fox, he's a white guy. What are some other... Oh, Gabe, who runs Steam. We had dial-up in that closet 10 years ago. We probably did. But, right, so, what are some other big guys? Gabe Newell, who, kind of started off the accessibility to indie games in a way that nobody else had at that point, or at least monetized it in a way nobody else had at that point. When we see all of these guys, all of these people, who are famous indie game developers, they're mostly white guys again. So you already kind of have that as a precedent. And unfortunately, it has historical precedent behind it, right? So the independent movie movement. Also, basically any movement you have, white men are going to be more in power than everybody else. And so the indie games follow the same trajectory as, as movies, as TV, and people who are pushing the boundaries are all, they're people who are pushing the boundaries who are black, who are East Asian, who are Latino, but people are still going to put their money, even in indie games. Thanks, Eli, for coming in. Even in indie games, right, they're still going to, if you need to find somebody who's going to help you get a loan for creating video games, or you need help, getting a studio together and getting other people to help you out, there's still then, unfortunately, all of those cultural biases are still then ingrained in that. So banks are less likely to give black people entrepreneurial loans in general. And that's just a statistical fact. Right? When it comes to taking time off of work or being sick or anything else kind of socially where you might have to have health insurance, you're going to have to buy it through the state because you're not working through a company anymore. You're focusing all of your intentions on this indie game career. then that also, all of those biases then come into play too. So it's not that the indie game scene is then a great equalizer where anybody can produce stuff, because if you want to make indie games as a way to sustain yourself, if you are black or a woman, then you're going to have to, then you can't rely upon people tuning in and only purchasing your game, right? Because there's so many other things you have to take care of too as being a black person. Gosh, how do I even do this? Oh, cool. That you don't have to think about when you're white, or you might have easier time with. So getting people to donate, or donate to a Kickstarter, getting people to getting traditional loans, all that stuff is just generally easier for white people to get, just because that's how economics work in America at this point. So you do see a lot of black game developers who do make games, especially, you get a lot of circulation online in terms of free games, in places, made like Twine, for example. But the overall market for indie games right now is still kind of then caught up in what the gaming market in general looks like. The bigger you get, the more similar the indie scene is going to get to mainstream games. So then that means all of the biases, all of the ways that the mainstream industry then makes it more difficult for people of color to become creators and producers, the same thing's going to happen to indie games. So unfortunately, that's what's happening with indie games right now too. It's become a big movement, which is great because it's allowed people to express themselves. Indie games are awesome. I shouldn't say awesome, but having that ability to make indie games is great. But you unfortunately still have the same issues as the indie scene gets bigger. Especially when, game jams and that kind of stuff are... Oh, this is ice. This has ice physics to it, so this should be interesting. What's the phone number attached to the Venmo? Oh, do you need to know the phone number? I don't think you need the phone number, because Katie donated to it. Travis, do you know if we need the phone number? Okay. But anyway, so the indie scene is getting bigger. And then you start having medium-sized studios, which have always been around, but have become slightly less viable because of the indie scene in many ways. It's just all one big mess. Basically, like what you're seeing now where people are protesting and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, everything's horrible. That's kind of the same thing. That's happening with video games too. Like, there is not one part of running a business that's not being affected by this. Megan and Maddie say hi. Hello. Because just the way things are set up now in America. Oh, does that mean I can jump into it? Dang it, no I can't. I was hoping the ice would protect me. Aesthetic is based on nostalgia. I wonder what that says about the kinds of stories and characters we generally see in them. That's true too. A lot of indie games are based on nostalgia, which is why it's kind of funny, because then something like Celeste is, very different from what we see before. So if I think of other 8-bit games or 16-bit games or 32-bit games, for example, that use that aesthetic, most of them are probably pretty closely attached to the stories and the ideas of the past. So things like Shovel Knight, for example, and a lot of other popular ones kind of have that same aesthetic to it. But then you also have ones like, and this proves, the exception is not the rule. So we can't put too much stock into them. But that's what makes games like, the success of games like Undertale and Celeste interesting, is because you are using those aesthetics and then, dang it, you're using the aesthetics and then you're kind of playing with the stories that are generally being told, using those aesthetics, right? So Celeste is talking about mental illness, and also features a female character with a complex background. Or you talk about Undertale, which in so many ways is like insane that it exists in the way that it does. Who that then is like talking about LGBTQ stuff. So it's all generally just kind of. We've hit 255. Guys, I'm doing a mukbang. It's decided. I'm doing a mukbang next Sunday or next Friday or whatever. We're doing it. Something that then is interesting then. So like Jack was saying, the indie games, the aesthetic is kind of the nostalgia of it, right? So a lot of the creators are looking back at the past era of games, for example, and then kind of creating games based off of that. So that then might not lead to them challenging kind of the norms of the industry. So, and also, we know that nostalgia sells. So, and with nostalgia, part of the reason, there's some research being done on this, and I'm probably don't know all the research, so I can't say specifically what's been done. But a lot of people that have talked about nostalgia have talked about in the ways that nostalgia is not only looking back on the past, but also a lot of men, a lot of nostalgic stuff that men engage with. So my friend Stephanie, who has researched about these, I have to jump, that has done research about TV shows that are really hyper masculine, those TV shows on the History Channel, Ice Road Truckers and that kind of thing, or Forged in Steel, or Forged in Flames, Forged in Fire, I don't know. Right, it's nostalgic because it wants to make men feel the world still kind of revolves around me, for lack of a better term. And so the nostalgic factor of indie video games then becomes a little more difficult to untangle, because you have you have creators who grew up, and they're not, and the thing is, it's not intentional, right? So a lot of these game creators aren't intentionally trying to make games that exclude black people or don't include, but the effect of that unintentional bias is that then these same forms of power continue with each other. Alaskan ice fish lumberjack hunting truckers. Got all of them in there. So it's a whole lot of mess right now in the game industry. And I can get red. I don't care. I got there was a CFP put out by a video game conference, and I sent this to Travis, and he understands my feelings about it. There was a call for a video games conference. I'm not going to say which one. I'm not going to drag them through. I'm going to cancel them. That's not my intention. But they were having the military come in and do a presentation about jobs that people can do in the military. And surprise, surprise, the military then also has very many connections to video games in ways that are problematic. Or I shouldn't even say problematic, because that's generic. It's in ways that the video game industry has benefited from military industrial complex, being getting money off of these things. That then comes with its own issues too, right? Of homophobia, racism, and sexism, and all that stuff. So it's not just who is in the game world, who's in the game studio. That's one part of it, right? So it's great that I'm playing games made by black creators. I don't know how I did that. But the other problem is then, who are these games being, what companies are supporting these games in terms of who's giving these startups money? And we have the Department of Defense giving people money, right? They're giving money to independent game developers who want to come to this conference, and they're giving them money to create games for the military. So then you have associations with the military. right? You have all of the cultural stuff that the military has going on, then becomes imbued in games culture because that is something that is within the video game realm. You have people who are, game developers and investors. What's going on at those places? Who's getting to decide who gets money, who getting invested in their studios? Who's deciding on Steam what keywords companies are using or games can use? Who decides on on social media platforms? Who gets to decide how people advertise? Who gets a bigger voice? How things are being ran? There's a great book called Algorithms of Oppression that talk about how search algorithms are deliberately designed to benefit white men. Again, sometimes unintentionally, but it still exists. It's still an effect of those actions. So it's not just the game studios themselves have work to do and games themselves have work to do, but it's all the other ways that games can be discussed, talked about, advertised. Everything that goes into it is affecting these decisions and is affecting the types of things that are possible within video games and within indie games. So all of that matters, which can be a lot to take in, definitely. But it's all important stuff that we got to look at, which, by the way, a lot of video game scholarship is not looking at, which comes with its own issues. So then you have people who are the authority on video games also not talking about these things, which then makes it even worse. I'm rambling, but are AOC and Cardi B gonna stop by? If AOC slid into the DMs, I would be so happy. When AOC runs for president, Cardi B can be like Secretary of State or something. I get to be vice. Oh, I didn't know. Okay, that was a mistake. But this is something, and this is a sneak peek to what are you going to do once you hit 500? Travis, you gotta help me come up with an idea. The mukbang isn't working. What am I doing? Am I supposed to go? Oh! That's weird. Oh! I need to figure out what I'm gonna do. I don't know. Honestly, I'm just so happy we reached 250. Like, that to me is crazy, and it just shows how great people are, and how great my friends are, and people who are listening and watching, and everything. It means a lot to me that we're kind of uniting with this. Chick-fil-A mukbang. No, I'm not giving money to Chick-fil-A. Period. I unfortunately can't do McDonald's or Wendy's either because they donated to Trump's campaign. I guess I'm gonna have to do Culver's maybe. Nah, I'll do or finally play through Billy Hatcher. Oh, probably shouldn't have done that. Well, Travis, it may or may not be confirmed at this point. I guess I can't speak for judge lest ye be judged, as they say. But there may be some Game Detectives playthroughs coming your way. Let me just say that. Because we may or may not be in the same city. I can only sing 76 trombones. I watched Victor Victoria yesterday, and Robert Preston's in it, and he's the guy who played the Music Man, and that's how I knew. Travis, if we did Mario Party, I would be so happy. I would be so happy. I don't know if we're gonna do Billy Hatcher, Matt. I don't know. I can't promise anything. Oh. Dang it! You had to edit all 5 parts together of you playing them all. I could do that, Allie. I could do that. Eli, you could help me. Eli, it's for Jerry. I can edit all the parts of music pieces of what together. And there is so much. I could design my own claves. There's so much extra crap around my house. So I'm just waiting for this platform. Let's speed it up a little bit. I forgot I can speed things up. That made that so much easier. I like the vibes of this game. I like the art direction of it. I think it, like, for a $5 game, it's really effective in what it's doing. I think. Oh wait, there's probably a... Yeah, there's a little platform I gotta wait for. You're doing great, sweetie. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Shoot! I didn't do amazing there. But I know what I'm supposed to do. Ooh, my legs. I'm currently sitting cross-legged, so my legs are going numb as we speak. Yeah. Okay, let's try this. Woof! That was lucky. I should... Oh, I just fall down there. How can we create an environment where Black game developers have more opportunity? That is a very loaded question. What's the name of the game you're playing? So I'm playing a game... Eli, I'll get to your question because that'll take a little longer. The game I'm playing is called Chrono Ghost, and I have the link for it in the bio of this video. So, or in the description of the video. And it's actually very enjoyable. I like it. I don't know why the screen is off center there, but. How can we create an environment where Black game developers? That's a good question. Unfortunately, there's no like one size fits all answer. Unfortunately, I think it starts. Ooh. Chrono. Ooh. Oh, I think part of it. I think part of it is, and this is something I've been thinking about, and I've talked to you, but I've kind of learned through my education courses as well, is that like, because because it's intentionally designed to be this way, right? So so maybe not necessarily, everybody is thinking it this way, or not everybody contributes in the same way, but the way that a lot of institutions have been set up, so education, for example, where it's not just school segregation, but it's also, the idea that funds for school is based off of property taxes, and then even if you have the same exact areas with Black people and minorities are considered to have less money in worth, their houses are worth less money. Anyway, so it's gonna take a lot of intentional things, right? So I think it's kind of the opposite of what a lot of these gamer guys online are saying, right? Where you're saying like, well, why are you intentionally having Black people? You're just being a social justice warrior. I think it has to be intentional, right? So if we know that there are these problems with the education environment and they're set up to be that way, we can't just say like it shouldn't be that way and then it'll stop being that way, because there's a history to it, right? There's 100 years of public education history, and even longer for groups like Native Americans. That history is long. Luckily, with video games, the history isn't as long as some of these other institutions. So we might need a little less work than things like TV and movies. Maybe. I'm not saying we do, but I'm saying it's possible because we haven't been around as long. But it's going to take more intentionality in terms of the developers and who they choose to be on their teams, right? Who are they hiring? Who are they bringing in? And who is running these companies, right? You have issues with Japanese game development, which is different than the American context, and that is its own bucket of worms. Own can of worms, excuse me. but it'll take intentionality. So um, it's really going to take game developers not just to say like, oh, we're going to donate $100,000 to the Black Lives Matter movement like Game Freak or the Pokemon Company did, right? That's a start, but it's going to take like the Pokemon Company, the Nintendo, Nintendo of America, they need to hire more black people, and that's like just the way it is. They have to, because that's the only way to break out of these inequities is to actually like deliberately try to correct these inequities. Oh, shoot. I think that's also, in terms of game development, that's also then something that I think the lack of singular vision in the media makes it more difficult as well. I agree with Travis. Yeah, with this one too, it's like in a way, it's kind of similar to movies in that, it takes a village of people to do it. But which is much different from it is that there's no. I mean, you have a creative director that does things, right? But it's not necessarily in the same way that like Tarantino was a director, or it's like the director or executive producer of a video game does not perform the same functions as the executive producer of a movie. So then it becomes more difficult too, because then you can't have, the influence of one person is then not enough to, kind of change things. It's not enough to make things different as it might be in a TV show or a movie, right? Where you can have a showrunner or a TV producer, or a director who then amasses the team they want. It's a little different with video games. So I think that also is a part of it, Travis. And that's true too. Like Travis is saying, even if you have, let's say, an African American writer, the game itself, it might have 10 writers on it. Or if people are, not one person doesn't write all of the dialogue for a game like Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts. Oh God, I hope there's only one person that writes that, because that writing is terrible. But but games that have like branching narrative paths have way more than one person writing the story. Just like how scripts, right? You have one screenwriter technically, but it's way like there's more than one person working on that script. In video games, that's amplified, right? So you have way more than one person working on a video game. Way more than one person working on the mechanics of the video game. Way more than one person working on the visuals of a video game. So at all levels, right, if you hit the quota of, black game developers that you want, that still doesn't necessarily mean that the vision or the lived experiences of minorities, sounds like it was 100. Oops. Yeah, so it basically, like, there's so many people working on a video game in these large studios that it then becomes, I am the spirit of time. I control all elements of time and space. Spirit of Time, that is Rauru in Legend of Zelda. Just kidding, that's the Sage of Time. The ultimate challenge. Oh gosh. This will probably take me till 4. If we get done with this early, I might just... I don't know if I should start the other one. I'm not sure. Okay. Anyway, so part of it is that, the development team, if it's not, really trying and emphasizing that it wants, like, a vision to talk about Black lived experiences, it's probably not going to do that, right? And that's part of where the intentionality comes in, right? So it's not very likely that one writer or one programmer is going to be able to have or exert influence. On an indie development team, that might be a little different. So you might have, for an indie game, you might only have one writer who writes everything. And that presents a more unified vision. And also presents an opportunity, for that kind of thing in a way that production in a AAA studio does not. Gosh, it's getting warm in here. I do think also, too, that unless video games as a worldwide global phenomena, there's a lot to deal with there, too. Because there's a lot of racial issues in Eastern Asia, where a large portion of video game audiences are. So things like Japan and Korea have their own constructions of race, their own discussions about race, in ways that a lot of times do reflect American or United States or Western European discussions, but in many times are more like located centrally in their own cultures as well. So we want to avoid thinking that racism in the United States looks the same thing as racism in Japan, or racism in South Korea, or racism in Germany, for example. So when you have these large games being sold deliberately, and like the idea is to sell it for an international audience. So video game developers aren't developing games just for, say you're like Sony and you're developing a video game, and you're like the United States, Sony division, and you're creating Spider-Man. You're not just creating Spider-Man to be sold in the United States, even though that might be your primary audience, but you also need it to be localized for other countries. And the thing is, that localization process then also affects what can be put in games. And we see the same thing with movies now, where stuff like The Avengers, right, they're deliberately being made to be as simple of a story as possible, even though you have like a whole bunch of characters, right? The storylines and the dialogue have to be as simplistic as possible to be localized. Or at least have to be marketable in a certain way. And that's the same thing with video games too. So you need to have video games, if you want to talk critically about race, you have to take into account not only what the United States audience thinks about race, you also need to take into account what the Japanese audience will think about race. You need to also take into account what are how do Koreans talk about Black people or Latinx people? So unfortunately, you have these big game studios who don't want to deal with these questions, right? They don't want to have to worry about that, because that is not something, right? Their MO is to make money. Their MO is not to be, advocating for a better world, which then gets into capitalism, which again is its own discussion. So unfortunately, because the main audience is in a different cultural context, it makes it one more level higher in terms of difficulty for trying to understand how race can work in a video game. So then you have the opposite being the case as well. So you have companies in Japan and Korea, or China, or any other country. Could be a company from Germany, or could be a company from Cameroon, like I'll play later today. And because they're being created by people who are from these cultures, you then have these companies and these people who come in with their own biases, right? Or their own cultural understandings of race, who are creating these games. So then, in a place like Final Fantasy, the biases of race and culture in popular culture in Japan, for example, affects that production. Even if the developers aren't deliberately being like, we're going to be, right, they're probably not up there being like, we're going to be as racist as we can be. The cultural environment that these games are being created in affects the way that race is being shown in these games. And when you have Japan and Korea and other countries, a lot of games and a lot of the audience are coming from these countries, that's going to affect how that can be showed and discussed in games as well. So it's really complicated, right? It would be really nice just to say, well, we just need more people to buy games by Black people. Like, that's great, but then it also takes a lot of it takes a lot more beyond just what we as one audience member can do to advocate for that. Because it's really a global issue at this point. It's a national issue, 100%, as we're seeing right now, but it's also a global issue, right? It's an issue of global audiences. It's an issue of global flows of money. So it gets really complicated. Matt, don't tell me you hate capitalism. Oh boy. Too afraid to end. With large companies like that, they will always take the social position that results in least fiscal loss. That is very true, right? So you have Blizzard, who doesn't want to associate with anybody who's doing the, who supports Hong Kong, but they'll support Black Lives Matter because they know that loss of fund, because the majority of what they're getting is from East Asian countries, particularly China, as a big example. So they're going to take the social position that gives them the most money or loses them the least money. That's also a reason why outside of video games, right, we want to see companies not only donate money, but we also want to see them actually put in the work to do something about it, right? About it in their companies, about advocating for it in cities that they work, etc., etc. So, in many ways, video games have almost more of an international audience than any other medium, or at least they're designed for more international audiences in mind than any other medium, which makes it then difficult to then talk about. That's also why issues about gender and sexuality are also not discussed here, right, in video games as well. So, but then Chinese McDonald's are blaming Cooper. I have not heard that. Supporting but IDK, it's better than silence or condemnation. Yes. So I'm gonna respond to these one after the other. So the Pokemon Twitter page, right? So Pokemon has donated $200,000, which is great. They're still, the Pokemon company runs the biggest selling IP in the world, right? So the Pokemon company runs the largest. Like, Marvel makes a lot of money, Pokemon makes more, which is crazy if you think about it. But it's something, right? It's a start, and we want people to begin. I'm just gonna fall because I went the wrong way. We want people to make progress, right? We want companies to stand with this, and it is something, and we want that. But we also want to make sure that they're doing the work. So if we want Pokemon to, it's like kind of what we want individual people to do too, right? So we want not only individual people to, let's say, donate what they can to causes, but we also want them to be like advocates in the workplace for, being more equitable. We want them to do things that can positively affect the world around them. We want them to volunteer. And I think that we also should expect the same from these companies too, especially because they have way more money than any of us individuals ever will. So I agree, it's a start. It's a start, right? Like this live stream is a start. It's not going to solve everything. And there's more I should do as David Kutchik, in order to help. And this is one thing I'm doing. So it's like Pokemon 2, right? Putting it on their Twitter, having the donations is great. I would love to see them do more. Okay, when it comes to Cooper, I have not heard about that in McDonald's in these countries, so that is crazy to me. So I should read up on that, because honestly, I would not be surprised. With the way that China is treating the Uyghur Muslims, it does not surprise me at all that that would happen. Uyghur. And Matt, yes, capitalism has a lot of issues. Sorry. Not sorry. Baby, I'm sorry. Sorry. Demi's on the mind. But a lot of the issues that we see when it comes to not having black development in video games is tied to the way that money is being passed around in these areas. So that's an issue that we still gotta talk about, right? Still gotta think about too. The McDonald's thing, I'm not even surprised. And McDonald's, I love McChickens, I love McFlurries, but I gotta stop. I gotta stop with the McDonald's, because I can't do it anymore. Can't do it anymore with them. But I mean, like, it's sorry to be like a downer, a little bit, I guess, but it's also, I mean, also the issues that we have. Wendy's too. Yeah, I know. Wendy's, I can't do it anymore. Oh, now the frame rate's dropped a little bit. I mean, the issues we have are complex because the way things have ran are complex, right? So it's not just the fact that slavery happened, but it's also because it existed for so long, because of the way that it was perpetrated, because of the, like there's a historical account to all these issues. So then also the solutions are going to be complicated. They're not going to be easily solvable. So we just gotta have to admit to ourselves that this is something that's going to take a lot of time, and it's not going to be something that's going to be easily done. It's not something that's going to be, we're not going to solve it within the next 2 minutes, or with the, $1,000 that I hope we make. So it's just something we got to keep in mind too, is that the revolution, as it were, is not done yet. Oh, shoot. Do I hate capitalism as an economic policy? It's all right. So this is me putting on my nerd hat. It's hard for me to be like, I hate capitalism, because I am actively benefiting from it, right? So like, capitalism is designed to make people like me rich. So it's hard for me to say I hate capitalism, because that it's nice and all to say I hate capitalism, but then it's like, I will then go to a job and then I will go work at a university where everything is run by capitalism, and the only way I can get money is through capitalism. So I don't like it. I can't say I hate it, though, because I also benefit from it, if that makes any sense. That's a fallacy, though. You're right, Travis. I know. I don't like it. I think it's bad. You can criticize systems. Yeah. So, I mean, and again, that's what makes it complicated, is, right, I want things to change, but I'm also getting benefits from how things are right now. So I think it's something that needs to be acknowledged at the very least. I'm gonna run out of time. I'm very much criticizing the systems that I'm a part of. I have 3 seconds left. I'm not gonna make it. Do I have to restart the whole thing? No! Oh gosh. Mock Wendy's for us. Half-gallon chocolate milk. Oh, Jack, thank you so much for that. That is going to make me so happy. Okay. Let's try this again. Well, that happened. Oh. So there is also a fallacy in thinking that any... There's also, I think, a fallacy in thinking that any economic system is going to be perfect, because the point of an economic system is that it's inherently interested in not having things be equitable. So if we have Cooper, I 100% agree with you. Right, so part of the problem with capitalism is that crony capitalism is a big part of it, right? So because of the way that we've regulated things and the way that we've let people abuse other people, this form of capitalism that we have is basically crony capitalism, which is where, these big companies can combine forces and buy out people. And so, even people who want to, if we really believe in the American dream, which we all know, if we're listening by this point, is kind of a crock of shit, there's no such thing as the American dream for a lot of people, because these companies have so much power over what happens in the world. Something that I think I like the idea of having some kind of democratic socialism, because I do think there should be things in place that benefit, everyone. So, like, I like the idea of of national healthcare. Wow, we're talking about economic policy now, right? A national healthcare system, I think, is good, because and maybe this is my educator hat coming through, I consider health to be, right, a public issue, right? So this also ties into environmental stuff. So if we want our people to be healthy, we can't just let companies do whatever they want to our waterways. I think it's the same thing with public health systems in general, too, is that if we want people to be healthy, if we want our society to be healthy, then our people should be healthy. And therefore, I think we have a duty to people to make sure that they are healthy. And if they are consuming our products in ways that hurt them and harm them and lead to cancer, they deserve a restitution for what happened, right? They deserve to be compensated and covered for things that we have, as a society, have allowed to happen. Internet 100% needs to be subsidized. In today's economic system, it's as vital as electricity was way back when, right? When it was starting to be a public utility, it needs to be subsidized now too, because the lack of access to internet is egregious, and because it's affecting old white people now, I think it might actually happen at some point, but we'll see. But I think for me, I'm gonna lose this one again, aren't I? For me, there's no such thing as a perfect economic system, but the way things are now is far from perfect and is not going to be leading us anywhere positive. I'm gonna restart this level because, holy moly, I keep dying at this one area, and I only got 15 minutes, so. Oops. But I also at the same time, we also see, and this is why I think straight socialism without understanding historical precedent would not work, is because we know from the research that areas of color, or areas where people of color live, have worse regulations for environmental stuff. They have worse access to healthcare. They have worse access to social institutions like libraries and things. Yeah, I agree with Travis with the ideal of capitalism, right? The idea of pulling yourself up from your bootstraps is completely farcical. Anyway, but say like we completely obliterated capitalism as an economic system, and then we just went straight into socialism, we would still have the historical precedent of all of those years where black people don't have wealth in the way that white people do. So if we want to adjust the economic system that we're a part of, we're still going to have to keep in mind these issues about race, about gender, about religion, about ethnicity. Those are all things that can still possibly, affect a socialist society. Let's say if the U.S. turns on a dime, right? And we can say theoretically that the U.S. could become a democratic socialist country and solve all those issues, but we know in practice that that's not what happens. So it's still important that we think through these ideas as well. How much you can pay. I agree. T-Cuddle Shark. And Eli, I'll get back to you soon. Shoot! I'm doing so bad at this. 18. I have 50. Shoot. I think so. The internet thing again, that should be accessible to everybody, and that presents issues if you're talking about living in a city versus living in the country, etc., etc. So, Eli, I'll talk about yours now. So I think when it comes to, and this can be said of the same thing of should straight people write gay characters? Should non-LGBTQ people write LGBTQ characters? Here's what I think. If you are interested in writing a character but you want them to reflect the lived experiences of the people, right? The purpose of having a black character in this case, I would say, would be you want it to be the lived experience of what it means to be communicated into the story, right? So that's what the difference between, let's say, representing a black character and representing a black story is, that the experience that you want to communicate is part of it. I think it's much more difficult for white people to truly understand what a black experience is enough in a way to write a story that feels authentic to that experience. I think it can be helpful. I mean, it can be there can be black characters that appear in your story that maybe necessarily the lived experience of black people as it is in America is not a part of their story. That I think is completely fine. Same thing with LGBTQ people, right? It's you can have people in your story who are diverse, and let's say but it's not necessarily that the lived experiences of people as it is in America affects that story. I do think, however, that if your goal is to say something about race as it exists within the society that we're living in, I think that should be, the voices of black people then should be highlighted better. And I think it can be done with research, and it can be done with respect, like Travis says. It can definitely be done that way. But for me, it's I would want to hear that, you want to hear it from the horse's mouth. You want to hear it from the people that it is being directly impacted by. Because if I want to truly understand what that means to them, right, what that means to them, what that experience means to them, I kind of want to hear it from the people that are fully experiencing these issues. I'm curious about writing black characters into a fantasy. Yeah, so there's been some research about black people, sci-fi in particular, and Afrofuturism is a big thing that people research, which is kind of about Afrofuturism. For a very, very rudimentary idea of the subject is, right, imagining a black future. And that could include discussing racial issues. Now it could not. I think when you talk about black fantasy, right, that then becomes its own line of things, or its own line of thinking. I think a lot of fantasy in general is kind of imagining what the world operates like outside of the world we currently live in. So even if we talk about fantasies that maybe are based around historical things, right, the idea is not to be historically 100% accurate. It's to be envisioning a world that's outside of the world that we currently live in, where the rules of the physical environment or fantasy itself is a very complicated genre to talk about, surprisingly. When you talk about inserting black characters into fantasy, then you have another layer on top of that, right? So it could be that you have a black author who's writing about fantasy because they just want to envision what it would be like for a black character to have magical powers, and that's the extent of what they want to talk about. Or you could have a black creator who wants to talk about race, in their fantasy novel, so they're going to have everything, all of the social issues of, race in America, but they're going to put it in a new context, so then, people can approach it in a different way, understand it in a different way. You could also have game developers or story developers who are just like, I like magic, and I'm black, so my main character's black. So the intentions and the approaches behind it can be very different. And then it gets even more complicated, and this is where my research focuses mostly, is that when you have fans or people who consume that media put their own ideas on top of that as well, then it becomes increasingly more complicated, because then what the fantasy means to the author doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to the audience. Anyway, blackness in fantasy is not, it's not just, it's not necessarily, it's not everything, but it's not, it's not nothing. I don't know what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, the way that you incorporate it, the way you write about it, the people who write it, the people who consume it, all of those things go into the meanings that are circulated within that story, including how black characters are being included in that story. Yeah, Jack, I like that observation. A lot of the things... Oh! And it's... a lot of the things that, are your main obstacles are things that you can't control. But I think what makes this one really interesting and different from, Braid, for example, is that everything does not slow down, right? So there are things you can control, but you cannot control everything. Which... shoot. Which then, the things that you do control can be the biggest obstacle, but then it's also the things out of your control. And it's the way you design the puzzles too, right? So you could design it to make the player think oh, this is how this puzzle is going to work. But then you throw something where they can't move it, and then they have to think about it in a different way, right? Shoot. Yeah, so much of fantasy is based on Tolkien, and kind of the elves and forest creatures. A lot of it is based off of medieval mythology, right? But there's plenty of other spaces in the world where you can derive mythology from. Shoot. So that's why, Toni Morrison in, I forget which one it is. It might be in Beloved. It's The Bluest Eye, possibly. Right, she references, there's a reference to flying people, which we could assume would be oh, those are harpies, or those are gorgons. But there's a long history of certain African tribes having mythologies where it's not gods flying, right? Or it's not inhuman, or creatures that aren't human flying, but it's actually humans flying, and that has its own cultural set of markers to it. So fantasy is not just the Tolkien stuff, but it's also mythology of other cultures too. So that again makes it more confusing, and comes with its own set of issues. Yay. I think I'm getting close to the end. This is scaring me. It's making me nervous. Oh, I made it. Okay. Oh. I only died 39 times. This time. Is that the end? Oh, no it's not. Okay, shoot. Oh! So the magma makes it all sticky, so I can't move as well. Thanks, Jack. I wonder... Oop, oh gosh. Shoot, I forget I can't move. Okay. Oopsie. Whew, it's been 2 hours. Almost 2 hours, I should say. It's making me tie-tie. Ooh, okay, so I need to fly over the top of that one. Woo! There we go. I don't know how I phased through that one, but somehow I did. Oh! I like the backgrounds to this too. Like, it's not right, so it's not like the most detailed, but it still works really well for the environment that it's, the game that it's. Again, this game is only $5 and it's been pretty fun. Somehow I keep falling through this platform. I don't know how that works. There we go. Shoot! Oh, I don't know if I'm going to make it to the end in time. Shouldn't have jumped. Got me in the toe. Oh. Oh. I think this might be a coding error for this platform or something. Maybe not. Maybe I operated under that assumption. Oh, shoot! Okay, good. Okay. I know what I need to do. Whew! Oh! And oh! We've been talking about a lot of great stuff today. It's been making me happy. Obviously, there are people who research this stuff for a living that can describe it way better than me. But I think it's been good that we've been talking about some of these issues, and we've raised $255. What the heck? So yeah, I'm getting tight. I'm gonna need some coffee between. Dang it! Oh, that was scary. This is you playing this game and not me. Other games by Black creators. There is an IGN page that I found this one on. The second one I'm gonna play, which is Orion, Legend of the Corey Odan, that I got from an IGN article as well. So in general, there's if you Google places, I'm not as familiar with the black. I've done a lot of research on queer games, independent games, but not so much on black games. So I don't know about queer independent or black independent game spaces like I do for queer game spaces, so it might be interesting to see. But doing some Google research, I think, is a great idea. Um, shoot! Oh no! It got all the way to the end. Okay. There is a form of this game where you can play it without having a timer, but I thought it would eliminate some of the drama of me playing. And honestly, I actually don't know that many that are created by like exclusively like all black studios or all black creative teams. Um, I know. So the Legend of Cory O'Dan that I'm playing this tonight is actually made by a team that also made it into a comic book. So, oh, that frame rate just dropped. Um, shoot. So I know that that's a thing, and they're a studio out of Cameroon. I don't know elsewhere because like my research is not that good, to be honest, and I'm not as well versed in it as I probably should be. Um, but also in general, that's just something that game development studios like don't want to talk about, or like video game things in general. Video game environments, Woof. Okay, this is freaking me out. Ah! I did not see that coming. That came out of nowhere. I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. I like legitimately don't know how I'm supposed to do this. It comes out of nowhere. So close. Oh, okay. Hoo-wee. Zooey mama, as they like to say. I've got 7 minutes left. Oh, not what I meant to do. Oh. You just tried. You gotta feel it. Have you tried investing? I have not tried investing. I do not believe in the stock market. You know that. Just as I thought. Trash. Alright. I'm going to wait for this to pause, or to get full, and then I'm going to pause it. Or not. Oh, no. I wish I didn't have to wait as long for this platform, because that really is eating up my time. I just gotta get good. That's what I gotta do. Why don't you believe... Okay. I don't like anything where people predict what's going to happen and then they do money based off of it. I don't like that. I don't like it. I don't like it. Nothing. Oh gosh, what do I do? He's seen Uncut Gems. I haven't seen Uncut Gems. My boy Kevin Garnett, I haven't seen him yet, so. Okay. I'm really lucky that that hasn't hurt me. Dang it! Do I have a 401k? I do not have a 401k. Because basically all of my jobs, besides teaching, all my jobs have, don't really have don't have an option for me to do that. Whoa. Shoot. Gosh darn it. I don't think I'm gonna make it, guys. That is okay. Okay. Now I'm getting into it. Like I wanna win before time runs up. So I don't think I'm gonna do it though. Oh no. Shoot. Guys, this is scary. I'm becoming too delirious for this. Okay. I don't know why that happened, but I'm good. Okay. Oh, okay. These are moving platforms. I got 2 minutes left, guys. I did not mean to do that. Okay. No. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. What? Wait, what? Okay, it's a moving platform that goes upwards. Great. Okay. Just gotta. No! No! Oh, guys, I'm done for. Yeah. I'm done. Oh, it is what it is. What can you do? All right, I'm gonna call it good then. It's 3:55. I want to thank everybody who donated, who excuse me, who watched, who helped me with this. It was my first time doing this, so I'm very nervous. And I really appreciate everybody watching and donating and giving to these causes that really need it, and really can benefit from all of this. It sounds like our total so far is 255. Hopefully we can raise that up a little bit. I'm going to DM some people and yell at them and tell them to give money. So I will see you all again at 6. Well, maybe not all, but I'll see you at 6 for Aryan, The Legend of the Cory Odan. And it's a little different from this. It's much more of an adventure style game. So we will see you all then. I'm going to go take a break. I'm going to drink some water. I'm going to eat dinner. $255 for the first block. Sweet. We are on track for our goal. We just need the same donation later. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to keep this up so people can laugh at me. Bye.